I want to take a walk down memory lane. If you listen to Democrats these days, they talk about Donald Trump and his team being an affront to democracy, to our Constitution, to our very way of life. I mean, have they always supported illegal immigrants? Let's think. Have Clinton, Biden, Obama maybe had a different position? I don't know. Let's take a look.
In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes.
Senator Biden, yes or no, would you allow the cities to ignore the federal law?
No.
I think we got to have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked.
Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable.
In most worlds, they call that hypocrisy. The Democrats who suddenly now are outraged about Donald Trump, all of them, those are their leaders. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, either their presidents or their nominees for president, all being very clear about the position that we should be taking. It's only when Donald Trump actually executes on that do they suddenly have a problem, don't they? And yet here we are, going against Donald Trump every day because he's actually executing on something they said they did. I promise that they didn't keep, that he is. All right, guys, what a week it's been. I mean, every time I talk to someone, they keep joking. They're like, it's been 2 months of Trump, but it feels like 2 years. I think it's been like 3 years, but who knows? I'm not really sure how we're calibrating, but it never stops. Think about everything that happened this week, right? It's the Kennedy Center, the call with Putin, the JFK files. And then, by the way, and then Chuck Schumer just falling on his face, the canceling the book tour, getting pummeled by every single Democrat out there. I mean, it's embarrassing to see this guy get emasculated the way he has. Today, though, I want to have a conversation with you guys about DEI and ESG. That's right. And because Trump's been rooting it out in the federal government, they're putting out these orders, just pulling it out from the root in all of these federal agencies, which is great. And I'm excited about that. But the investment community, it's not so much. The big guys are still making it an issue and they're trying to walk it back. And if you remember Vivek Ramaswamy, he founded a group called Strive Asset Management. And I want to talk to them about what they're doing. So stick around for a second, because this is going to be a fascinating conversation about crypto, about investing, about where we are with tariffs. I'm so excited about this conversation because I don't think it's gotten enough attention aside from a bunch of media folks who know nothing trying to tell us about what's happening. Why not actually talk to some experts about that? So before we get that going, though, it's Friday, and I thought I'd have a little fun. So before we get going, I want to take a walk down memory lane. If you listen to Democrats these days about Trump and what they're doing on a whole host of issues, they talk about Donald Trump and his team being an affront to democracy, to our Constitution, to our very way of life. We are dismantling it, they say. But fortunately for all of you, maybe not for them, I have access to this little thing called the internet. Based on the fight that Democrats have put together just on the front with respect to deportation of people that are in this country illegally, who have broken our laws, I started to wonder if this was just a Trump thing. The Democrats just maybe didn't like Donald Trump, that they used to maybe be okay with certain things, but not now. I mean, have they always supported illegal immigrants? Let's think. Have Clinton, Biden, Obama, and Clinton maybe had a different position? I don't know. Let's take a look.
In the budget I will present to you, we will try to do more to speed the deportation of illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes.
Senator Biden, yes or no, would you allow the cities to ignore the federal law?
No.
I think we got to have tough conditions. Tell people to come out of the shadows. If they've committed a crime, deport them. No questions asked.
Undocumented workers broke our immigration laws, and I believe that they must be held accountable, especially those who may be dangerous.
In most worlds, they call that hypocrisy. The Democrats who suddenly now are outraged about Donald Trump, all of them, those are their leaders. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, either their presidents or their nominees for president, all being very clear about the position that we should be taking. It's only when Donald Trump actually executes on that do they suddenly have a problem, don't they? They had no problem talking the talk. Their party said nothing. And yet here we are, going against Donald Trump every day because he's actually executing on something that they said they did. I promise that they didn't keep, that he is. It's fascinating. So that's where they stand on deportation of people in this country illegally. But the other big issue that Democrats have these days is Doge, cutting out waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, I started to say the same thing. I wonder if Democrats actually have always been so against actually being respectful of taxpayers. If they not really wanted to get rid of waste in the past, or again, like deportation, is this a Donald Trump thing? So I started to think about this. What if people like, I don't know, President Obama said about waste, fraud, and abuse? Take a look.
Everyone knows that getting rid of the deficit will require some tough decisions. And that includes cutting back on billions of dollars in programs that a lot of people care about. But what should be easy is getting rid of the pointless waste and stupid spending that doesn't benefit anybody. We're calling it the campaign to cut waste.
You know, there's been a tremendous amount of waste and fraud in the government during the Biden administration, which estimated the federal government fraud to be $500 billion. What we're trying to do is get that number down to a much smaller figure, save money for the American taxpayer, stop money being spent on things that I think very few taxpayers would agree make sense. Transgender animal surgeries. Or why are the 20 million people who are definitely dead marked as alive in the Social Security database?
You notice when Obama did it, the campaign to cut waste, it was a good idea. When Donald Trump and Elon Musk do it, it's a bad idea. It's funny. He asked some pretty common sense questions. Why are people who are 150 years old on the Social Security rolls? Why? That's not a Republican thing. That's not a Democratic thing. Why do they join us in liking this effort? It's because their hatred of Donald Trump overcomes everything else. It's amazing, isn't it? When Elon says it and executes on it, it's a bad thing. When President Obama says it but actually doesn't execute on it, it's an okay thing. Think about that for a second. They always talk the talk. They never walk the walk. They never get results, but that's okay. When Donald Trump does it and actually executes on it, well, that's the problem. Maybe because they've always known for decades that no one's actually going to do it, and all of these leftist progressive ideas are never going to get touched. They can talk a good game and never have to worry about cutting out all their buddies who are reaping the benefits from them. But look, that was Obama. He was maybe not the most recent guy. What did, say, Joe Biden think about waste? Maybe in the realm of entitlement, somewhere that the Democrats are very clear we can't touch, right? To them, that's a third rail. You can't possibly touch them. So I wonder what Joe Biden had to say about that.
Everybody also agrees, I got from this morning, but I think we had before, that we waste a heck of a lot of money, and that somewhere around a third of all the dollars we spend on Medicare goes for nothing useful. We're not cutting Medicare benefits in this. We're trying to eliminate the third of the problem that's a waste, and this is a big entitlement. It's a big entitlement. Medicare, it exists. We got to figure out how to keep it from bankrupting the country without denying seniors what they're entitled to.
Okay, so you might say to yourself, well, Sean, both of those guys are out of the picture. So how about some of the leading Democrats still in office? You know, the ones who have the loudest voices, that are the biggest haters of Doge, Elon, and Trump. I mean, let's think about this. Maybe let's get the take of the queen of insider trading, Nancy Pelosi, the socialist in chief, Bernie Sanders, or the Senate Democratic leader whose book tour just got canceled, Chuck Schumer. What did they think of these efforts to cut waste, fraud, and abuse in the government? Let's look.
We simply must make the cuts in waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare. We owe it to our country.
There is an enormous amount of waste and fraud and abuse in this government. When there is waste and fraud, you have an administration who should also be on top of that situation.
If we're going to eliminate the waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare, it does mean we're going to cut some of that out. We want to cut the bad stuff and keep the good stuff.
You get that? We must do it. We must do it. It makes sense. Well, at least it did, didn't it? It's so funny how these same people, do they not see themselves? Do they not see these clips on the internet? I get they're all really old. I mean, think about it. They probably don't need someone to show them the clips, but somebody should. These are their words. They didn't just support it. Nancy Pelosi said, we must do it. We owe it to people to do it. You heard them. It's just funny because the media won't play those clips, so I do. Because it is unbelievably hypocritical for them, all of them, to say these things about what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to do. It got me thinking, and this is just a maybe. Just maybe it's really not about cutting waste. Maybe it's not about doing the right thing. Maybe it's just about politics. All right. Anyway, I wanted to get to you guys, again, this big discussion on where we are with tariffs, where we are with crypto. Donald Trump just announced a big crypto reserve. I think that's going to be huge. Plus this idea of where our money is going and why, and whether or not these big investment firms are still riding that left-wing liberal woke horse or not. So I'm going to talk about this with the leader of the Strive Asset Management Fund, this group that Vivek Ramaswamy founded. You remember that went the opposite direction? But before I do that, I want to tell you about a great guy that I think if you've been a longtime watcher of the show, you know. His name is Leo Grillo. He founded Delta Rescue, and it all started with one Doberman that he rescued on the side of the road. And he named the Doberman Delta, which he said stood for dedication and everlasting love to animals. He took that one rescue mission and turned that into the world's largest no-kill sanctuary, not shelter, sanctuary. So abandoned dogs, cats, animals, horses of all shapes and sizes get to go to Delta Rescue. And Leo and his team provide for them the veterinary care, the nutritional care that they need for life. For life. And that's the key thing. And as I've told you guys, if you've been a watcher of the show before, this is not some USAID government program handout deal. Leo Grillo does all of this out of the goodness of his heart and the support from people like me and you. So if you're an animal lover or just someone who loves the fact that somebody on their own initiative is doing the right thing, then I would ask you to go to deltarescue.org and support the work of Leo Grillo. Make a contribution. I have personally done this myself. Gone on the website to deltarescue.org and made a contribution. They're out west in the LA area. And so especially when people started abandoning their animals, these were the guys who stepped in and took care of them. No questions asked, for life. So go to deltarescue.org, make a contribution. At the top, you're going to see an estate planning kit. Maybe you have an old 401k or a stock that you could consider putting towards Delta Rescue to help keep this an enduring mission. And there might be a tax benefit for you. Talk to your tax professional to see that. But please help the work of Delta Rescue and Leo by going to deltarescue.org. All right, before we get to this discussion that I'm so excited to have this Friday, I want to tell you, speaking of financial stuff, about what Ramp has done for me and my company. I have a Ramp card. It looks like this. Okay, it's an actual Visa card, a physical card. It doesn't have numbers on it. I'm not that dumb. I'm not going to give you my actual Ramp card. But this is an expense management system. So if you've got 5 or 5,000 employees and you have somebody, maybe you're the CFO, maybe you're the owner, it doesn't matter. Or if you're just in charge of finances and expenses, then you need to, or accounts receivable, I guess they call it, then you want to get a Ramp card in a Ramp system. This is the expense management system that's going to save you so much time and money. It takes like 15 minutes to sign up. They've got this white glove on concierge onboarding system. So they'll reach out to you right away. What can we do to help? How can we, tailor this to your company? For most finance teams, I know they spend about 80% of their time doing busy work, chasing receipts and categorizing stuff. This will make everything happen for you. Categorization, expenses, limits for employees. It literally will help you forecast stuff and plan, and it does it all for you. It gives you complete and utter control so that it will save you time, make you more efficient, give your employees more of a focus. And for a limited time only, listeners of the show can get $250 in their pocket, literally in their pocket, if you join Ramp by going to ramp.com/Spicer. Ramp.com/Spicer. It'll save you a ton of money. It's easy to do, easy to sign up. You get physical and virtual cards right off the bat. So you can begin making changes like in minutes. If you sign up, go to ramp.com/Spicer to take advantage of this unique offer. Cards are issued by Sutton Bank, member FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. All right, without further ado, I wanted to bring in Matt Cole. He's the CEO of Strive Asset Management. This is the firm that Vivek Ramaswamy started that steers companies away from ESG and DEI management practices and is going to give us some insight as well, not just that, but in terms of crypto, what the government is doing, and whether or not tariffs are going to be beneficial to us in the long run. Matt, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. Thanks for having me.
So walk me through, why is Strive Asset Management different from other places that you could put your money in? How did it all come to be?
Yes. So Strive was the return to fiduciary duty as an asset manager. And in a certain sense, you might laugh and say, why do we need an asset management firm that's strictly committed to maximizing shareholder value, promoting capitalism, promoting meritocracy, promoting innovation? But over the last several years, as you've seen the rise of ESG and the rise of DEI, you saw almost every single large asset manager reject those core principles of American capitalism at the expense of the shareholder. And that's why Vivek Ramaswamy, who was the co-founder of Strive, myself, before I was even part of Strive, when I was actually at a pension fund, CalPERS, and several other people just across the financial services community saw a need for an asset manager to return to old school fiduciary duty. So that's what we're doing. And
okay, but how's that different than like what I have if I open up, if I call, I don't want to name names, but I mean, I call Chase or whoever, right? Charles Schwab or some of the other ones I see on TV. Why is that different than what they do? Like, what is it that when you say fiduciary, are they not fiduciaries? Are they not looking out for my best interest?
Yeah, so there's several different layers to this. I'll give you a couple different layers. In 2019, there was a business roundtable statement where 181 CEOs of large American companies, including many of these large asset managers that I'm happy to name if you want to, but we don't have to.
Name names. I love names.
Blackrock, State Street, Vanguard, Invesco, all rejected American capitalism and said that shareholder primacy. So shareholder primacy is this concept that the most important stakeholder for a for-profit organization is the shareholder. They said that's outdated. And today, corporations need to earn their social license to operate. And so that was where you saw this rise of ESG and DEI, which, now a lot of these companies are kind of doing the Homer Simpson meme and trying to walk back into the shrubs. But what they've never admitted is that what they did was wrong and harmed shareholder value.
Okay, so just time out for a second, right? Whether it's me individually or like some pension fund, right? The reason I give somebody money to invest, or I would assume a pension fund or whomever gives a manager money, is to make them money. Is that fair?
That is completely fair. Not to push in some values, whether those values are left-leaning values or right-leaning values. That's not why you give an asset manager money.
No, I mean, right. I mean, the reason I invest is because I want to make more money. Okay. So when you say it changed, so these big asset guys, right? So the Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock. What was it that changed and why? That's what I don't understand. Like, I give money. I mean, that's how they sell you, right? When you get pitched, hey, we should grow some wealth for you. We should invest your money. That's the pitch, is we will make you more money. To be honest with you, that's the only pitch I've ever received. And is that what they're saying is outdated? And when did that happen and why?
It really happened over the last 10 years. And so this was the rise of the European model of capitalism, which is called stakeholder capitalism, which is really promoted at the World Economic Forum in Davos every year. The rise of that in America. And why did that happen? Well, it happened on a couple of different dimensions. One, because Europe was forcing it into America, but then secondarily, the largest sources of capital in America are pensions in blue-leaning states like my former employer, CalPERS, or the New York City Pension Fund, the New York State Pension Fund. And all of those large asset managers push asset managers like BlackRock or State Street or Invesco to adopt and also push into corporate America ESG and DEI, or they won't do business with them.
So explain ESGI and DEI. I mean, for those people listening and saying, what are those two terms? I mean, I get DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion, but what's the ESG one?
Yeah, so it's about environmental, social, and governance. And so in a certain sense, you might say, well, okay, whatever, three words. What does that even mean? And that's part of the feature of ESG, is that it kind of feels a little bit, doesn't really strike you as something inherently bad just when you hear the three names. But what it actually is on the E side, it's pushing American companies to constrain themselves beyond the law for the good of the climate. When it comes to S, social investing, what they're specifically meaning there is DEI. Push DEI into corporate America is higher on the basis of gender or race rather than merit. Right? We've seen the rise of DEI and how unpopular it is. And then when it comes to G, governance, that might also seem like a pretty vague term, but what they mean by governance is incentivize CEOs to push in E and S into their companies. Otherwise, they don't get their full paycheck. And so that's how you can put them all together.
Okay, I still don't get the why, right? So first of all, I want to take a step back because we talk about like these big guys. You mentioned Invesco, State Street, BlackRock, Vanguard. How big are they and how much of the market do they control? Let's start with that.
Yeah, so BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, each in the realm of $5 to $10 trillion of assets. Invesco is a little bit smaller, but if you combine them and you look at pretty much any company in the S&P 500, you'll get to somewhere between a 10 to 25% ownership position combined by these large assets. So they're the largest owner combined of basically every single large publicly traded company in America. And many of the retail investors that might also be owners tend to not vote their shares. So if you have an ownership position in the company, you get a vote on the future direction, who's on the board, major decisions. Well, retail doesn't vote, so that means that effectively whatever these large assets.
What does that mean? Retail doesn't vote? I don't understand that. What does it mean?
It's like a election for a country. If you own a share of Apple as an individual, you get a vote every year at their annual proxy event. So you can vote for the board of directors. Who is on the board of directors at Apple? You have a say in that. You have a say in certain strategic proposals that will be on the board. So as an example, this year at Microsoft, there was a proposal if they should consider putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Well, every single person got a vote if they should consider that, yes or no.
Okay. And so I get these all the time because I have like an E-Trade account, right? So I'll buy a bunch of shares here and a bunch of shares there, depending on like, and so I get these things. And should I actually vote?
Oh, you absolutely should. And I don't know if you do or you don't, but the most common reaction from an individual investor is they see these things and they're like, okay, like that's great, I'm busy. And they kind of just end up putting them to the side and not voting. So the vast majority of individuals don't vote. And so that puts more power into the hands of those that do vote, just like America. If you don't vote in an election, then you put more powers in the hands of those that do vote.
So basically, let's just say that there's 100 shares of X company, right? And I don't vote, but BlackRock, what you said, owns like 25% on average or something like that. If they vote all 25 one direction, the board is going to really care what BlackRock or State Street thinks and not worry because people like me don't vote.
Yeah, exactly. And that 25% is those large asset managers positions combined, not just BlackRock, but they tend to vote as a block, especially when it comes to these ESG or DEI proposals.
So I still don't get the why. Like, in other words, if I'm shopping around, I run a pension fund or whatever, an investment fund, and I'm doing business with BlackRock or State Street or any of these companies that you mentioned, these management firms. And they come to me and they make a pitch and they say, all right, Sean, we're going to make you, our investing method shows that we beat the S&P 500 by, 2 points. We're a good investment. And the other one comes to me and says, hey, Sean, we're going to make you some money, but we're also going to push environmental social justice or governance. Aren't most people going to say, hey, make me the money?
Yeah. So this gets into a dirty little secret of this is that most of these holdings, this 25% that we're talking about, is in passive index funds where the return is the S&P 500. And so if let's say you voted in a way that harmed the value of Apple, well, that harms the value of the S&P 500. And so you wouldn't notice it in the return of, as an example, the SPY, which is State Street's 500 fund versus the S&P 500 itself. They would move the same, whether it's for better or for worse. And so it really was an interesting way to be able to impact change into corporations that doesn't actually obviously showing a deviation between your fund's return and the benchmark. And it gets back to why, why, before the backlash to ESG or DEI, where right now we're sitting here and we're aware that there's a massive backlash to ESG and DEI today. And you see people like Robby Starbuck of the world's really calling this out, right? Major pushback, and then people get up in arms and will boycott companies. Well, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, it was all good and no bad for these companies. They push ESG and they push DEI, and then the large blue states pushed them up, and no one else really cared or understood what ESG or DEI was at the time. So it used to be just all good from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, okay, and I want to get to the Robby Starbuck question in a second, but I guess the question I'm still troubled by is the why. Like, if you're Vanguard, like, what got you to think, hey, you know what we should do is tell our investors that we should really care about social justice and diversity. Like, I just fundamentally can't get, I mean, like I said, at its core, when I go to invest money, I want to make money, and I don't think I'm alone in that. Most people, the reason that they're investing and taking a risk is because they think that there's going to be some higher return in the future, right? And so I just don't get the pitch when they call you and say, hey, listen, here's the deal. With our money, if you invest with us and we'll handle your money for you, we're going to make sure that there's social justice. I'd be like, dude, I don't care. Give me my money. Make me more money. Stop with this nonsense. I don't understand how that took root.
I think it really took root after the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009, where Wall Street became extremely unpopular. And so you saw this populist movement against Wall Street that was mostly led by blue states. And I think of it as like a deal. And so when you implement this DEI or social justice into corporations, there's actually a lot of data that shows kind of what is the return, the ultimate return drag to investors. And the way you can look at it is that you can compare American equities over the last 40 years versus European equities, because in Europe, social investing and heightened regulations and a focus on the stakeholders being customers or employees over shareholders, had been the law of the land, actually, and the way that most corporations operate. And the return difference is about 3.5% per year if you fully implement Klaus Schwab's stakeholder capitalism theory as your economic theory from the governmental level to the company level downwards. And so moving on that spectrum in that direction, you can think of it as a tax. It's not necessarily going to make every company bankrupt, but if it keeps people happy and there's no pushback, and now there is pushback, but if there is no pushback, then you could think of it as a tax to survive as an asset manager and as a company.
All right, so I want to get one of the things that they were big on is climate change, and the thing that I didn't get in climate change is, like, I have some stocks that I own in oil and gas companies, right? And they've done very, very well over the last, 10 years or something like, and it's for a lot of obvious reasons in terms of energy. If you are BlackRock or State Street or whomever, any of the companies you mentioned, and I want you to invest in like solar and wind, these are smart people, I assume, right? And so how do they justify throwing that money away, knowing that you honestly, I mean, you mentioned being a fiduciary, like, it's a bad bet. Like, solar and wind is not a good return on investment. It's just not. And how with a straight face or with a fiduciary responsibility can they say, hey, we're investing your money in a wind farm, knowing or telling Exxon or whoever, hey, start to be more climate friendly, knowing that that's not going to make the company more profitable.
Yeah, so in a free market society, you are completely right. And in actuality, most solar and wind investments have not been good investments today. You'd been better off investing in oil and gas. But I can tell you the best argument for investing in solar wind, which, now under the Trump presidency, I don't think is a credible argument. But I'm just gonna rewind a couple years to say, like, what would the argument have been back before we know what we know today? And the argument would have been the government's going to heavily subsidize solar and wind to help make it a great return to investors, number one. And then number two, oil and gas companies don't have a future. And not only do we think they don't have a future because of government pressures, we're actually going to vote our shares in ways that are effectively going to close them down. And I'll give you an example. There's literal shareholder proposals that have been on the ballot at Exxon that the group that puts them forward, they themselves, not me, they themselves call them a Trojan horse designed to have Exxon stop future oil and gas production. They call them that. And so you might say, well, how could these go on the proposal? Who could possibly vote for them? Well, many of the large asset managers actually voted for the proposals. And
Wait. So the people who are supposed to manage my money to make a return are voting to basically shut down the companies that are supposed to be making the money that they're investing in.
And you might say, well, how is that not just the biggest fiduciary breach? And I
Right.
kid you not, I've been in forums where the heads of these large asset managers will talk about the rationale. And the rationale that they'll say is, I know you're going to disagree with this. I disagree with this. This is how they frame it.
Yeah.
Is what there is a climate crisis in the around the globe, and if we basically can vote in a way that might harm Exxon, it might help the other 499 companies in the S&P 500. So our index as a whole will do better because we saved the globe by sacrificing Exxon. And so that's how you can justify this, but it's wild.
Oh my gosh. All right. So how does Strive, I mean, when Vivek and you guys, like, what was the goal? Just to go to investors and say, hey, do you actually want to make money? Do you actually want to do stuff? Or was it trying to get people to tap into the cultural piece of it?
Yeah. So our view was always, we are fiduciaries. Our job is to maximize value. And so we were concerned with corporations on two fronts. One, that they were massively violating fiduciary duty, these asset managers, by harming corporations. And we should help fix that. But the pitch was never, here's, corporate America's moved to the left. We want corporations to be, Christian organizations or, take stances against abortion or something like, no, the purpose of a corporation is to be mission oriented, make great products, great services, move back to the middle where both from if you work for a company, they shouldn't be supporting some political cause. And so that happens to be something that hits really close to home to people that lean on the right, because they personally see these companies that have gone against their values. But our view is that to take this to first principles and that the right response is remove politics from corporations, make great products and great services, serve all Americans, and have a apolitical message. But it definitely will feel most close to home to those that feel most personally impacted by the direction corporations have gone.
But at Strive, you guys don't care. And I'm asking this, not saying it. So just to be clear, but you'll invest in a company as long as it makes money. Meaning, if I said to you, hey, there's this leftist woke company in Kansas that's making whatever, but the returns are insane, you guys would be like, well, we have an obligation to make money. You're not. Whereas the left is looking at it like we're going to enact an agenda with your money. You guys are like agnostic. Is that fair?
Yeah, we're capitalists, and so all of our ETFs today that are equity are passively managed, so they're an index fund, right? So whatever's in the index fund, we're going to own. But to give you an example of this, within our index funds are solar energy companies, right? That generally speaking, I agree with you that solar has not been a good investment. But our message to them is you should stay mission focused. You're a solar energy company. You should be the best solar energy company possible. We're not going to try to push in some Trojan horse agenda to kill their company. No, we're not going to do that. Or say you guys should compete, and Exxon, you should be the best oil and gas company, period. Exxon shouldn't be forced to shut down their oil and gas operations and become a solar company. That makes no sense, right? It's just pushing every company to be the best version of themselves and to maximize long-run shareholder value.
Okay, but that solar company that you mentioned would have to be, in order for you to invest in them, you'd have to think they're going to make money, right? You're not investing in them because they're solar. You're investing in them because they've got like a plan to make what you think is going to be a good amount of return.
It would be because they're in the index. So as an example, we have a 500 index, the 500 largest companies in America. If a solar company happens to be one of those
Oh,
companies.
right. So you're choosing them because of merit, not because of what they do.
Yeah, and we're not excluding companies because they're woke or they're, political in some way. We're trying to push them to be the best versions of themselves.
Right. So if Nike makes a ton of money, you're going to invest in Nike.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's, I wish we could find better companies. I mean, what I would love to see in a perfect world is an index fund made up of companies that I could actually say, I love the companies in here and they make money. Is that possible?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I think.
Could you create a fund, Matt? Could you create a fund that said this is the American fund that Strive puts together, that like they are conservative values? Is that a legitimate kind of construct?
So you could. The problem is, if you were to do that, let's say 7 years ago, that fund would have underperformed drastically the regular index fund, and I'll tell you the simple reason why. The best performing stocks over the last several years have been the FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Google, those sorts of companies. In this index that you're talking about, you would have never put those companies in there, right? You would have excluded them. And so our view is that, yes, you could create that, but we don't want to create an index unless we think it's going to have some reason that it will outperform over the long run. And my view is that a company going into political realms is a massively negative signal, but it's not the only signal. And if a company has a massive tech mode or something like that, like there's other factors. And so it should be a factor in investments, but if it's the only factor, then I would worry that it may not be the best performing index or fund over the long run. And I mean, you even think about now the political winds shifting. I mean, this is not related to a stock, but like a cryptocurrency. Solana actually this last week had some wild advertisement that was like very pro American exceptionalism and MAGA and all this stuff. And then you rewind 4 years and they were doing the same with Black Lives Matter.
No way.
These
wait, hold on.
are just like,
so wait, they just shifted their advertising?
They just totally shifted. And so would we put that like if that was a company, would we put it in the index now because now they've they bent the knee? I would say that's a sign of a lack of principle, right? Like they're just gonna go where what looks cool today.
So President Trump, you kind of mentioned this. I mean, he's been talking a lot about making crypto. How does crypto fit into your model? And like, I'll be honest, like I have I think it's a Coinbase account, and I bought, a bunch of like whatever the entry stuff is. So I bought a couple pieces of a Bitcoin. I don't even own a full, like even close to a full bit. I mean, how does that fit into your model? And like, as an average dude who maybe is sitting out there and I say, hey, I hear about crypto. What should I do? Should I be involved? What does it mean that President Trump wants to have a crypto reserve? Like that to me is like literally speaking Greek. I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. I don't know what it means. Like, so what does it mean to you guys, and what should the average person do?
Yeah. So I'll cut to the conclusion first and then give a little bit of a backdrop. So our view is that almost every American should have a core allocation to Bitcoin, and Bitcoin specifically. We view Bitcoin as a unique and distinctive investment in the realm of all the different cryptocurrencies. And I do think that there will be a handful of other winners, but there's literally millions of cryptocurrencies.
Right. And I don't know the difference.
There's going to be a handful of winners. And I'm very, very confident that Bitcoin is distinct and will be one of the clear winners and solves clear, long run macro risks that both exist in the United States and the globe. And first and foremost of those is the debt crisis of the globe, including the United States, but much broader than the United States, and the continual printing of money, the entitlement crisis, all these long-term issues that we know exist. Bitcoin represents kind of an opt-out from that system, and it tends to be much more correlated actually with the rise of money supply in the globe versus the stock market. So if you think that there's problems that exist in the globe and that money printing, not just in the United States, but around the globe in Europe and China is going to continue, then Bitcoin is the most obvious investment to hedge against that risk.
Okay, there's a bunch of these like meme coins. There's one that's kind of got a 4-letter word that starts in it, like SH kind of coin. And like, I hear these other ones that people like, are those just like pump and dump? Like you try to ride the wave for a day, or are those investments that are worth looking into? Or is it just, hey, stick with Bitcoin?
They're the casino. So
The what?
The casino.
Oh,
If you like going to the casino, I would say if you had to put a gun to my head and say, would you rather buy a lottery ticket or a meme coin? I would actually pick a meme coin, but I don't buy
okay.
lottery tickets.
You've never bought one.
I'm not a gambler, but I think that I would rather do it than lottery tickets, but as an investment, they're not an investment, and almost all of them will.
So Trump has a coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would you invest in his?
No, it's a trading card. So if you like a trading card, then I think it could be volatile, but it's a collectible. I don't think these are securities, but I don't personally invest in collectibles. I like to make investments. So I'm not against meme coins. I think Dogecoin actually has some form of like staying power but again, they're collectible, speculative.
So it's for fun. It's literally going to the casino.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're, there's two types of people that go to the casino, as far as maybe more, but like you're either a hardcore gambler that knows how to do this, or you're like me who walk in with like $100 and have fun. And it's like riding a ride at an amusement park. You're doing it for fun, not because you actually are trying to make money.
Exactly. I used to be a pretty serious poker player back in the day, and
so you do gamble.
So I actually don't consider poker gambling. I actually consider it a game of skill. I don't do anything other than, I don't really play poker, and I don't have time anymore. But I love the game of poker. I love the game theory of poker. But there's a saying that if you're at the table and you don't spot the fish, you're the fish. And so I think for most people, if you're investing in something like a meme coin, I think the question to ask yourself is, why do I have an advantage over 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100 other people that are buying the same thing? And if you can't give a clear answer, you're probably more likely to lose money than make money in the meme coins.
Okay. I want to talk to you before we wrap up today about these tariffs, just on a investment standpoint, right? I talked to a lot of companies. I talked to some folks in the ag sector that were like, hey, this is worth it for the long haul. If Trump can get us market access and make things work, we've gotten screwed for too long, and we appreciate him fighting for us. And then there are some companies that are like, hey, dude, the supply chains are such that we would want to do X in the United States, but we can't because Y, Z, and J are made out of country. Like, I know what the president wants to do, and I think a lot of people applaud him. How do you think that this whole tariff thing plays out? Because on April 2nd, they're going line by line, country by country, and saying, this is our list of grievances, and this is what we're going to need to get a level playing field. You hear Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, and Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary. They seem to think that a lot of these countries are going to fold and say, great, we'll take our tariff down to zero, or companies will move back. What's realistic?
So I think when we get to the end of 2025, I think you're going to look at tariffs as a backward-facing thing that was a short-term struggle point for the markets. But I think that Trump is serious here, and I'll give you one data point that I think really matters, and that's that Trump's popularity is effectively at an all-time high right now. And so if you think about Main Street is a pretty big fan of what's happening, and Wall Street's a little bit worried right now. Some corporations are worried, but the reality is that a lot of these deals have helped corporations, they've helped the globe, and they've harmed everyday Americans. And so I think everyday Americans are happy to play a little bit with tariffs and try to cut better deals for our country over the long run. And if the stock market has some volatility over the next few months, which I don't think it has to be, but it's the case, at least so far this month, pretty big down month for the markets, I think that's okay. I think that there's not a way to change a global system in a way that's going to be more favorable for America without having some tolerance for pain. And so I think I'm a fan of them. I'm a fan of ultimately likely having some of them go through for a period of time, if not for the long run, to cut better deals for this country, which I think is drastically needed. And one last point that I think, my view is that AI innovation, when it comes to productivity, is going to be something that's going to be more deflationary than tariffs could ever be for inflation over the next couple of years. And so I just don't view it as something that's going to kill the American economy or something that I'm overly worried about for the medium to long run.
But you think AI will be a huge investment? That's where people could make a lot of money.
Not only just make money, but when I think about the cost of goods in this country, the cost that it takes to produce a good, to produce a service, I think AI as a technological innovation is going to reduce the cost of living in both America, but also the globe to a much greater degree than any tariffs that Trump's talking about is going to cause inflation. I think AI is the big story here, and tariffs are what people are focused on. But to me, I like to zoom out, and I think it's hard to fully comprehend what's going to be happening over the next few years with AI.
Okay, so last question though. That's what I think. What you're touching on is really important, because I think a lot of people, are willing to take short-term pain. But I think in America we think short-term pain is like an hour, and I think the tariffs may be in place for a lot longer, because it's going to take a lot for AI and a lot of time to negotiate in a lot of these countries, right? And in the short term, things will cost more. Fair?
It's definitely, I definitely think that there's going to be pockets of things that are going to cost more, but even one more point on inflation. Are you familiar with trueflation? It's a different measure of inflation than CPI.
Matt, I got a D in economics, so I'm going to say no.
Okay. Well, I don't know if I got an A, but maybe
you did. If you're running Strive Asset Management, you got an A. I'm just telling you.
I
got a podcast. You have an asset management firm that you founded with Vivek.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be blunt.
So trueflation takes some of the issues with CPI, which is how the Fed looks at inflation, and it fixes them. So some of these issues are, as an example, if the price of eggs goes up or down, they might assume that, Sean, you're not going to buy eggs, you're going to buy something else. And they start switching these things and doing all sorts of, the basket of goods just changes and evolves in massive ways over time. And it ends up being not a true measure of what actual inflation is. And so trueflation basically fixes all that. And the long story short is that during COVID, trueflation was off the charts high before CPI was showing anything. So people that were watching that, and I mean, the everyday person saw this too. They're like, the cost of things that I'm buying are going up, right? And why is CPI not going up? Well, now trueflation's actually showing much lower levels of inflation than CPI is. And so I'm really not concerned with where we are about inflation. And I think sometimes we put in place all these complicated algorithms and switching mechanisms that no one understands. And you end up missing the bigger picture. And so I think when you look at where inflation actually is in more of a real-time measure today, and then also coming, AI innovation, I'm not overly concerned about inflation. And I think we have some room to play with tariffs for the betterment of our country over the long run.
All right. Matt Cole, I've loved this conversation, mostly because I did get a D in economics, and smart people like you helped to inform me. So I appreciate everything that you, and also that Vivek and you guys did at Strive Asset Management to give an alternative to the big guys. And I appreciate that. Thanks for being with us as we round out the week. Guys, next week, the gentlemen, they call themselves the Fellows from the Ruthless Podcast, will be with us on Tuesday. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin on Wednesday. Mary Margaret Olahan and Seb Gorka both on Friday. A huge week headed your way. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Remember, my newsletter drops today, SeanSpicer.com. Please feel free to sign up. It's free. You can always buy a subscription, a VIP one, or even gift one. It's a perfect birthday gift, or, hey, it's spring. I wanted to say congratulations. Here's Sean Spicer's newsletter. That's always welcome as well. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks. Have a great weekend. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.